Hi, everyone. This is Teresa Aker from Success Diaries with Teresa Aker. I am so happy that you joined me today. I have a wonderful guest that I have the pleasure of meeting and learning from. The name is Joanne Lockwood, and she is the CEO of See Change Happens, trailblazing founder and CEO, helping companies with inclusive culture, and she's an expert at this. So I'm glad that she joined us today. She helps with organizations do positive practices supporting transgender and non-binary. I am thrilled that you're here today. Now, Joanne, I'm going to ask you questions, but I also want you to be open with us because this is a casual forum. I'm learning too. So I'm grateful that you're going to help me learn and help our audience learn because I respect everything that you're doing, Joanne. So welcome today.
Thank you, Teresa. It's absolutely a pleasure to be here, and I've
Thank
been so
you.
looking forward to having this chat. I'm excited to be here. So yeah, fire away. Yeah, fire away.
Perfect. So let's talk about transgender. Let's get down to the root of it. Let's talk about people who have for years and years had insecurities and did not know how to express themselves, go into the workforce and feel comfortable. How are you helping the organizations and wonderful individuals working in an environment and trailblazing to help them work with a comfort level?
Well, first of all, let me give you some context. So, as you've introduced me, my name is Joanne. Um, that is a female name. If you listen to my voice, you're first thinking, "Hang on a minute, I've got a deep voice." Just to give an explanation, that I'm a transgender woman, and I gender transitioned back in 2017. So that's coming up for sort of eight years ago. And I spent my previous, if you like, history running IT companies. And that's where I kind of started. But I got to my late 40s and realized that my own sense of self, my own gender identity, had been plaguing me for many, many years, as long as I can remember. So I took the step in my probably my early 50s, I think I was about 52, and I eventually gender transitioned. So I sold my IT company and embarked on this mission, if you like, to help others have a better outcome than maybe I did. And I'm not saying mine was terrible. So I now work with organizations, as you say, globally throughout the UK, helping them put best practice around creating environments where trans and non-binary people can succeed. Some of that is policy work. Some of it's transition at work guidelines. Some of it's helping people overcome the fear of getting it wrong around inclusive language. They're nervous about saying the wrong thing. And of course, we also live in a world that's very polarized at the moment, where we see lots of territories and countries with less than positive transgender inclusion around public services, around being able to change your name, be able to access medical or surgical intervention if they wish. And organizations also need to be able to adapt to the legislative environments, challenge people with more critical views, anti-trans, if you want to call it that. And it's a real minefield out there at the moment, and people are nervous and worried about putting their foot in it. And I think that's what I kind of do here. So I'm trying to demystify, have an open approach, engaging language to get people around the table and talk, not throw stones at each other and get really polarized and angry.
Perfect. That's exactly what we talked about just before the show. I wanted to say to you because I'm the same person that you're talking about. I'm nervous, but I don't know why I'm nervous. We try to be politically correct. We try to be respectful, and so we're not sure of the wording, and we're not sure of how people will be accepted, and we don't understand it enough. And I think you're doing an amazing thing, Joanne, by bringing. Can I call you Joe as a friend?
Yeah, call me Joe. No, please
Great,
do. My
Joe.
friends do. Yeah.
Because that's what people want. We want to be able to say, "Hey, we're in. We just don't know what's the right thing to say." And in a workplace, how do we embrace transgender, non-binary? How do we do that without feeling uncomfortable? And once we have these discussions, and the more discussions we have, the more confidence we have, and we know, it's just, it's not a problem. Everybody can work together. Everybody's still here. Everybody survived, and we're all respectful of each other. So thank you for for doing that, because I think even companies are probably struggling a little bit, and I can't answer for them, of course, but they're probably struggling a little bit of how do we incorporate this and not have any kind of disrespect in the environment, and let people work at their jobs without feeling that they're outside of the organization. Let's make sure everybody's included. Is that correct? Does
Mm.
that sound like?
Yeah, completely. And I know people struggle, and people often say to me, "I don't get how people are transgender, how people are non-binary. I just don't get it." And I go, "I don't get it either. I don't get it. I just know that I am. I can't explain it. I can't give you the mathematical equation or the biological equation or whatever it may be. I just know that I am." And that confuses people, because I know many people want absolutes. They want proof. They want reasons. I can't give you that. All I can say is my life was complicated, noisy, uncomfortable before I gender transitioned. And now it's simple, clear. There's clarity. There's no noise in my head. My life makes sense now. All I can tell you, the differences between before and after, I can't explain why or how. It just, now my life makes more sense. And that's the kind of thing that many trans people I speak to have a similar sort of feeling. There's this noise and confusion and double thinking and all this kind of mental health struggles. And there's suddenly, it's quiet and calm and there's nothing. And so people could maybe call that trans joy or whatever buzzword they want to use. But for me, it's just having complete clarity, one voice, one person, not being two people in my head all the time.
Okay, now, did you have this your whole life as you were a child and growing up? And let's talk.
Yeah,
And what about
I look
your
back on it.
family?
Yeah. So
What?
I look back on my life. Yeah, I grew up with a fairly vanilla family.
Sure.
They weren't radical, queer, out there. They were school teachers, living in kind of a middle class sort of, cutting the grass on a Sunday, picket fences, that kind of environment. So I grew up in a world where it was very white, very middle class, very, very ordinary. So queerness, gayness, lesbianism, whatever we talked about in the 70s. I'm nearly 60, so this was the late 60s, early 70s. It was just wasn't talked about. There was no reference points. But I remember, being in the first school. I'm not sure how that translates into the US school system, but I was 6, 7, 8 years old
Sure.
in the very early 70s, and I've got memories of wanting, feeling that I'm in the wrong place. I was a Cub Scout, a little Cub Scout, badges on my arm, little cap, and we used to have church parades every first Sunday of the month. And I remember sitting on these benches, and the brownies and the guides always used to sit in front. And I remember feeling that I was on the wrong bench. I should be with the brownies, should be with the guides.
Okay.
And that was when I was 6, 7 years old. I mean, couldn't understand it. There's no reference points. And there's a whole lot of other instances where, as I grew into my 8, 9, 10 years old, I experimented with wearing clothes. Sometimes it was my mum's clothes and other things. And again, this is pre-puberty, pre any sexual development. There was no reference point here. It was just, it kind of felt right that I should be treated as a girl. But yeah, of course, going back in that era, you can't talk about it. There's no one to share that with. You can't tell your mum. Yeah, if I was born and raised as a little girl, it would have been quite cute putting my mum's lipstick on, wearing her pearls and dressing up and her shoes and things. But I realized as a little boy, it was bad and it was shameful, and I couldn't talk about it. So I hid that, and that developed all the way through into my teens and onwards into my life. That this thing's been with me. This feeling of being in the wrong queue or the wrong, I don't know, being treated differently. The world treated me differently to how I was. And I'm not going to say I was in the wrong body. I was just in the wrong zone. I was in the wrong place. I was being treated in a way that wasn't me. on the inside. But of course, you get to learn how to mask and cover
Right.
and perform based on the rules you've got at the time. And I lived my life as a and brought up in my male self, not unhappy, just a little bit noisy in the head.
That's amazing. Joe, thank you for that part because I think a lot of young people today it's certainly more accepted. I would agree. Or do you agree with that? A little bit more accepted today.
There's a lot more awareness. I think the trouble with awareness and it being talked about is it opens up a public debate. So whilst people are certainly celebrated, embraced in one respect, there's a lot more pushback and vocal pushback for the people who aren't supportive, don't understand, don't get it, or feel that there's a rule set is being broken or transgressed. So yes, with awareness comes pushback. And I think what we're seeing at the moment in the world is a heightened awareness and support, but also with a heightened sense of righteousness against trans people, which is what's going on at the moment.
Now that's interesting. That's interesting to me because I too grew up in an era, same thing, very black and white. This is the way things are, and you basically followed the norm. But you knew that there were, I had friends that I just adored, and I knew they were different, but that's just the way it was. You just didn't discuss it. And I think what you're saying is the other side of the story is, okay, I didn't have this confusing idea, but but we just kind of accepted our friends the way they were. Is that fair? And then as
Yeah.
they get older, they're facing the very people who are having the insecurities. This, and that must have been very psychologically hard on you, Joe. Uh, they're now entering the workforce and doing this, and and as you said, you're boxing yourself in to the way you think you're supposed to be, so that no one notices. And I think that's really, really hard on anyone who has to hide their identity. Second, it may be just as simple as because we don't understand enough, you're getting the pushback because these those people who are pushing back perhaps maybe underlining have their own issues, their own insecurities. So now you have many, many people who need to be educated. Now, I would add that you left, I heard you loud and clear, left your IT business to help people. What I think is amazing is you went through all of this struggle and you're willing, even with all of that, to help companies help other people get into the workforce and feel comfortable. That in itself is merit.
Yeah, I think it became a bit of a passion. But my wife and I've been married for 37 years, 38 years this
Okay.
year, with two children. So I've, I had a pretty typical life growing up. You know, I didn't transition until I was 52. So yeah, and my wife and I, we actually took part in a TV documentary in the UK back in 2016 to 2019. And our motivation around that was to help others because if you look at the the rule book, if you know this unwritten rule book is that as trans people you're going to lose your house, you're going to lose your job, you're going to lose your
Oh,
family, you're going to lose this, and you feel like you have to sacrifice everything to transition. And what I wanted to do was say, hang on a minute, I don't want to play by those rules. I want to throw that rule book away. I want to rewrite it. And so
great.
by by being in a relationship with my wife where we've worked through this, we've had some tricky times, but we've worked through it together.
Sure.
I've worked through this with our children. I've worked through it in the workplace, in the world of work, and building a new career. I want to just unless we show people succeeding, how can you ever follow in that path? You know, you can't be what you can't see. So I felt I had a responsibility through my own personal resilience and my own personal capabilities to say not that if I can, you can, but be a bit. And I hate the word role model, but be out there and visible and give people hope and belief that I didn't see when I was at that age or when I was younger or when I was thinking about transitioning. Because I say the narrative out there and the rule book you're given is you will fail. It will be painful. Nothing's going to work. You're going to lose everything. And I want to challenge that and say it doesn't have to be that way.
I agree with that. And I would add, well done for your wife and your family to be supportive. Now, she knew all along that you wanted to transgender, or was this a discussion that happened later on in your
It,
relationship?
it was it was quite a significant time into our relationship. We had a phase in our marriage around about the 25-year mark, which is what, 12 years ago, where our children were growing up. You know, it's like we got a big house, living in different rooms, children leaving, empty nesting, where we brought question onto our relationship and our marriage. And as part of those conversations you have when you're at loggerheads and trying to discuss
Yeah.
things, I shared that I'd been cross-dressing and all my life, all of our marriage. It's been in my head, a bit like the conversation we just had, and that I didn't know where I was going or what I wanted to achieve. But there was, so as part of this kind of marriage reconciliation and refocusing we did, I kind of brought it out there. And that was in 2012, 2013, with no real trajectory or outcome or plan. But I think once I talked about it, once I brought it out in the open, once I could then bring it into life, it then became a reality as something that I wanted to pursue. So my wife and I, we obviously had, as you can imagine, many, many long conversations, lots of crying, lots of screaming, lots of shouting, lots of hugging, lots of loving each other. So all the emotions you can imagine over about 3 or 4 year period. And eventually, I'd say in probably about 2015, so about 3 or 4 years later, that I decided that well, it wasn't a decision really. It was more, I realized it became necessary
Okay.
for me to explore this part of me and leave the old part of me behind. So yeah, 2014, 2015, 2016 is where I kind of went on a test drive and took it for a spin, if you like, and then realized that this was going to be work for me. I could do this. And then in 2017, I sold my business and I set off in this new journey, changed my name, got a new passport, got a new driving license, and changed my life in 2017. Yeah.
That is fantastic. Honestly, Joe, that is what a story you have and what an inspiration. You really are an inspiration. I'd like to you've got the grown-up time, you've got your family time, you've been married, you have children, wonderful, everything has now worked for you, and now you're working in an industry with corporations, and this is the important part. You are now helping corporations bring people in and make them comfortable. So how do you help the companies how do you help them with educating? Is it, do you go and meet with them? How do you help the companies?
Well, pre-COVID, you know, back in the good old days,
Sure.
pre-COVID, I was traveling the country, traveling the world, standing on stage at conferences. I
Wonderful.
was going into organizations, running. I call them lunch and learns. You know, there's kind of like there's 1 hour sessions. We also for things like hashtags. So we've got Pride, we've got LGBT History Month, we've got all of these kind of hashtags and commemoration days of throughout the year. So organizations want to bring people in to sort of tell their story or to help them. So I do a lot of that. Since COVID, a lot of it's online, but I still work with organizations from Australia all the way through to North America and across Europe and South America and South Africa as well. So it's really global. Each country has a slightly different take, but
Oh,
fundamentally it's the same issue. But there are other challenges around legal issues, language, um, and acceptance, religion, culture, whatever it may be. So there's a lot of different challenges differently, but fundamentally it's about creating environments where trans people can survive. So in addition to the speaking, the awareness stuff, the inspirational, yeah, a bit like this, telling stories,
yes.
it's also working with organizations around policy design. And it's not just about transgender policies, non-binary policies. It's also making sure that the other policies are language inclusive of transgender people. So it's making
Right.
sure that you're not excluding a trans person or a non-binary person by always using he and she. You know, we've got to think about non-binary people would use they, them pronouns. So if we've got policies and statements that reference he and she all the time, we're potentially excluding or not including correctly non-binary people. So it's about shining a light on all policies
Oh,
and
okay.
making sure that they are trans inclusive. You know, parental policies, maternity, paternity. Those are very binary type languages. So making sure that as a trans woman or a trans man. So a trans woman is someone who was male at birth
Right.
and transitioned to be female. And a trans man is someone who's female at birth and transitions to be a woman. Just for anyone who's listening who doesn't understand the nuance there.
I get
Trans
that.
men who are sorry, female at birth still may have menopause. They still may have functioning womb and ovaries. They still
Oh,
may have
that's
periods
interesting.
and
Okay.
menstruate. So we need to make sure that we're not excluding trans men from the support around period products, menstruation, menopause. We're not excluding trans women around prostate and other issues that may occur there. Trans
Oh, that,
men may still have breast cancer or other struggles there, or ovarian cancer. So what we've got to do is remember that there are some biological underpinnings in people's bodies that we can't ignore, even though when you're looking at somebody, you think, oh, you're a woman, but I'm a woman who has a prostate, or I'm a man who has ovaries. So we've got to think about the language and making sure that our policies, our parental support, all those kind of policies also work for trans people as well and non-binary people. So it's not only is it around the transition at work guidelines, about glossary of terms, about pronouns and how we handle this changing one's identity from A to B, new driving license, new passport, new social security, whatever it may be. But it's also the holistic support around mental health as well as physical health.
that's incredible. So that's a very complicated plan to be able to help corporations put together. I wanted to ask you, Joe, you identify as, is it she, her? How do you
Yeah.
identify?
So my pronouns are she and her. I identify. Well, I say identify. I mean that sounds quite. It's not. I don't think that's great language. I am a woman with a transgender history. So I'm a transgender woman. I'm a woman in my language. Yeah,
Thank you.
saying I identify. I've got. I if anyone's interested in the gory details, I've had medical intervention, hormones, and various things.
Sure.
And I've legally changed my name in the UK. I've got what's called a gender recognition certificate, which is a government legal bit of paper that allows me to change my birth certificate. So my birth certificate now says female. My marriage certificate says female, as well as my driving license and my passport. So to all intensive purposes, any document I show you, I pay tax, I pay everything as a woman. So as far as the government are concerned and society is concerned, I'm a woman. And that's kind of how I am. Yeah.
That I understand. Thank you for the clarity. What I want to ask you then, could you help us? Because I think I'm getting my education around all of this just by working and meeting people. Could you explain to us the difference between that and people who identify as they and them? What is, and I mean this with all my heart. What would make someone identify as they or them? Can you help us with that?
Yeah. So if we think about the traditional model of humanity where we have a
Sure,
binary.
sure.
So we think about binary is a computer term meaning on or off, black or white. Is
Correct.
two states, yes or no, one or zero. So in human, if you like, culture, the social construct of humanity, we have a male and a female, a man and a woman. So that's our binary construct of gender or sexuality or sex. So someone who is non-binary, if you like it, I often use the term agnostic. It's a bit like being and not religious at all. You have no faith or religious outcome. So when someone's non-binary, they have no gender alignment to either male or female. It's not
So it
they
doesn't
sit in the
matter if they're
middle.
male or female, they can identify as non-binary.
Yeah,
So I'm a female, I identify as as a she. However, if I chose to say, because I've never felt comfortable with that title, I could say I identify as non-binary and I can be referred to as they. Is that the idea? Then no
yeah,
one decides if I'm a male or female. I'm just a person that's in front of you. Is that correct?
yeah, yeah. I think of it as taking off the shackles of your femininity or your masculinity and say, I'm not doing that anymore.
Sure.
I'm stepping out. So, I try not to describe it as in the middle of or between or a bit of each. It's rejecting the whole BS, if you like, of gender and that definition of a male and female. And say, I'm out of that. I'm non-binary. I use the they them pronouns. So, and I know people get confused about they and them being seen as plurals and more than one, but we use they them pronouns already. You know, you think if you walk into a room and see on the table, oh, someone's left their phone on the table. I wonder who they were.
Yeah, we don't
When I
know.
see them, I will give it back to them. So if we don't know who the person is, we already use they them and pronouns anyway, where that person is not known. So all non-binary people are doing is using an agnostic, a sexually and gender agnostic descriptive pronouns to describe who they are. So yeah, it's I appreciate it becomes cumbersome. It's not standard language, certainly in English, to use it, but you can adapt quite easily.
Oh, absolutely. And again, I respect that. If that's what people want to be referred to as, I'm fine with that. I'm sure everyone is, but again, remember we talked about it that you're not sure what you can ask people. You're not sure what's correct, what's not correct. And I think we need to get rid of those discomforts also so we can move forward. And I live in Canada, just so you know, and I would like to think we're pretty progressive in Canada, very liberal, and we're very welcoming and very inclusive. I like to think that way, but that doesn't necessarily mean it is that way because I'm not the one that has to decide or go through that. But for most people I know, quite accepting, quite loving, and nobody minds anything. So I think we're pretty good in Canada, but again, I can't speak for the general public. But I think education is so important, and you've clarified yet another area to help the public. Because I do hear people say, well, why should I refer to them as they or them? And what's the point? But it's not about the title, it's about respect for someone else's psychology, respect for their view, that we do have other views than this box that we've been put in. And as you said, the chains are broken away. And the more we educate each other and not be afraid to ask, I think it's better.
Yeah, completely. And
It's just my opinion.
yeah, no, I fully understand that some people go, well, hang on a minute, all this sounds too complicated to me. It's just too much effort. Oh, come on, this is not the way things were designed. You know, you should be a man or a woman. I don't get. I hear you. It's fine. I hear you. All I want to do is just introduce you to the idea that these identities exist.
Yes.
Your children, your children's children are growing up today where this is being talked about and discussed. And whether you believe this is right or wrong, the world is becoming more accepting for various different aspects of identity, whether it's not sexuality, whether it's gender, whether it's someone's ethnicity or faith or race. We as a society, wherever you may be, need to be more, and I don't like the word tolerant. Tolerant is not a great word. We want to be more celebrating and embracing people for who they are and not putting rules and judgment against our own rule sets. We have to be open to explore and celebrate somebody else being happy, living a great life without it being a threat to who you are.
Well said. I like that, Joe. I like that. That was well done, truly. Now, let me ask you, are we making headways in the companies? Are we getting somewhere?
Yeah, I feel a lot of love. I earn a good living doing what I do. I'm invited into spaces, into organizations, into associations across the world to create this education, because one of the biggest challenges I always see is the fear of getting it wrong. This is what we're talking here today. Putting their foot in it, saying the wrong things, using the wrong pronouns, using the wrong name, making an assumption based on my voice, my frame, my facial structures, whatever it may be. And people are really, really scared about upsetting. And of course, if you get it wrong, sometimes the person who's trans or non-binary is also going to feel a little bit upset. I mean, you mentioned you're Canadian.
I am.
If I'd have asked which part of the US are you from, maybe you'd have got a bit upset. I'm not from the US. I'm from Canada.
Doesn't matter to me.
But again, but that's part of your identity as well. And I respect the fact that people. I've met some Canadians, and don't you ever call me American? And they get very, very protective about their Canadian identity. So we all have something inside us that makes us proud of who we are. And trans non-binary people want people to see that. They want to see that passion. They want to be celebrated for that. And they don't have to keep feeling like they have to justify or looking people in the eye and going, you don't get me. You're not prepared to understand me. And it's like, if we just had that acceptance and that embracing and celebrating each other, then the world would be a better place, wouldn't it?
Oh, absolutely, Joe. Absolutely. And I think just this very discussion has it made me more comfortable because you said right away, you can go ahead and ask what you like. And I wanted to ask you, and I wanted to be protective perhaps of your feelings because I wanted to make sure that's okay. But as you open up and you're talking, you're such a warm person and you're very giving and you're prepared to educate people and make them feel better. And it's your personality, obviously, that's coming through, Joe. So that makes a difference too. You're not saying, hey, you have to be this way. You're just saying, just be open. That's all you're asking. And do it with love and respect, and we can all move forward. And I think that's such a simple, simple message.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, in this conversation and many conversations I have professionally, I'm professionally trans. So I'm going into these spaces
Mhm.
knowing I'm going to be educating, knowing I'm going to have people who are confused, then I'm having to put myself out there to build those bridges and create empathy. But if I'm in my day to day at home, going shopping, driving to the park, going for a walk, whatever I'm doing, at that point there, I take my suit of armor off and I expose my bare belly, if you like.
Yes.
That's where I'm vulnerable. I'm still a human being. I still have soft and squidgy bits unprotected inside me. And so I can be vulnerable when people are buying a coffee in Starbucks and they get it wrong. I can be hurt. I can be upset. So today I'm prepared. I'm walking in with my armor and my
Sure.
hazmat suit and my all my body protection in. But day to day, I'm as I say, soft and squishy and easily broken. So yeah, it's you have to accept that people you meet,
Yeah.
understanding where they're at in their life, in their confidence, in their resilience. And whilst you may not intend to hurt or harm, we have to remember the impact of your best intention could be quite serious, could be quite heavy. And I often say that, I don't know if you've heard this expression, sticks and stones can break your bones, but names
Of
can never
course.
hurt you. But we know that mental health and bullying and discrimination, all those sort of things, have a significant impact, even though they're not physical. So when I walk into a shop or a coffee bar or something and they use my wrong pronouns and say, hello, sir, what can I get you? Or here's your change, sir. That's like a slap round the face. It has a physical impact. And I will remember that and be upset about that for days and days and days, even longer. And I can still probably quote you incidences over the last 4 or 5 years where it's happened, and I still remember them. So you have the choice as a human being whether you want to embrace and celebrate me and amplify me, or whether you want to make me feel bad about myself, but create bad about the relationship. So you have the choice to change. How do you want to be? We talk about things like emotional intelligence, cultural intelligence, all these various things, or not being a dick, if you like. It's you have the choice whether you want to educate yourself and develop, or whether you just go, I'm not playing. You go, fine, that's fine. If you don't want to play, I'll walk away. That's cool.
Yes, and just don't challenge it, right? And I would
Hmm.
add, Joe, so okay, so you've done amazing today. I want to ask you if so you were young and you grew with this. What advice could you give young people who are struggling a bit? Is there any advice that you could share today that might help them along the way?
Um, yeah, I'm not. I deliberately steer away from giving people advice. I'm not
That's fair.
because
And I know you're not a
yeah,
professional, so I would
yeah,
qualify that with this.
yeah.
Perhaps
So
it's a little too
yeah,
deep.
my
So
yeah, what I would say is, as I say, the reason I don't give advice is because I respect perspectives and opinions and where
sure.
people are at. So I can talk through my own lens. I can talk through my own what my experience. What I don't want to do is say my privilege has allowed me to do this. I transitioned later in life. I had struggles being mature,
Sure.
having a family, and I had other challenges. If I was 17 or 18, I'd have different challenges. So it's not so much advice, but what I would say is lessons I've learned, if you like, that other people can maybe think about is one, you have to work on your own sense of self. Who are you? What's important to you? Your own values. The other thing I learned was in order to be loved, you have to be lovable. In order to be liked, you have to be likable. In order to be worthy of respect, you have to act in a certain way. So you have I took personal responsibility for who I am and how I show up and how people interact with me. I can't expect you to like me and respect me if I'm not a great person myself. So being trans doesn't mean to say I've got any right to be more respected than anybody else. So how I show up in the world is down to me. So I would say anybody who's struggling with their identity and things like that, identify who you are, what your core values are, what makes you you. How do you want to be with other people? And when you can find yourself and you'll have that authenticity and you can interface with people, then you'll be likable and respectful and all these kind of things. So I'd say work on yourself. I think
Yeah,
also work on the fact that the world isn't perfect for everybody or anybody. It's rough edges. You will have knockbacks. You will have setbacks. Things are going to go wrong. Things are going to go bad. Some of those things are because you're trans, and some of those things are you're going to have anyway. The grass isn't greener on the other side of the fence. The grass is just grass. So work on your resilience, work on that, work on your life skills, and then you'll be better able, to, if you like, to transition if that's what matters to you,
sure.
and work on building relationships, not destroying them. Is my advice is find common ground with people. You know, staying married for 37 years, having gender transition, isn't without challenges. So you have to work on that. You have to work on any relationship, any marriage. It takes two, and you don't have a free meal ticket just by being trans. So those are kind of like the life lessons I learned. But I also believe, the world isn't terrible. The world isn't terrible. The world actually is a great place. And if you sit online, you read the news, you read the papers, read all the media, it sounds like an awful place. You know what's going on. Some parts of the US, some parts of the Europe, some parts of society. It's not all like that. So maybe you just need to realign yourself, move, change jobs, change towns, change cities if you need to, change countries, which I appreciate is a privilege. You may not have the capability to do that, but you can bring your own change. I think, again, going back to taking some personal responsibility, building your network up of people who are going to be around you. As I was saying, find radiators and not drains. People who are going to amplify you, not people who are going to squash you.
Excellent advice. And excellent advice. I love that you said be yourself, find yourself, be who you want to be. And from there, everything else will, and I guess it is perspective, right? We take it from our own perspective. We all have challenges. We all have needs. We all have ambitions in life. So regardless, we still have to face ourselves and be the best people we can be and do it with love and kindness and respect. I think that's
Yeah.
wonderful,
Yeah.
wonderful advice. Joe, I've had a great time today. We have so much more. I'm hoping that you'll come back another time. Would that be okay with you?
I'd love to. Honestly, it's been a fascinating chat. So yeah, let's do it. Let's do it. Yeah.
Oh, I'd love that. Honestly, I love that. You're the most warm person. I'm so grateful that you came on today. Now, Joe, how can anybody who wants to reach out to you? I'm going to put your bio on here. It's going to be on YouTube and LinkedIn and different social media platforms. What is the best place, however, to reach you?
Most of my work is professional, so I would say LinkedIn. So linkedin.com/in/Joe Lockwood, J-O Lockwood is probably a good place to find me, or just search for Joanne Lockwood. My website, seechangehappen.co.uk, or if you just put my name into any search engine and type Joanne Lockwood on Google, and Bing and places like that, I come out on the top 3 or 4 pages, quite prolific. I've done lots of podcasts, YouTube channels, those sort of things. I have my own podcast, so yeah, I'm easy to find with Joanne Lockwood.
Perfect. Joanne, it was my pleasure today. For everyone else, this is Teresa Aker from Success Diaries with Teresa Aker. Joanne, thank you again today, and I look forward to talking to you all very soon. Thank you and have a wonderful day.